Final score at Celtic Park, Celtic 3, Hibs 1 on matchday 36 of this season's Scottish Premiership. Goals on the day coming from Nicolas Kühn, Idah and Reo Hatate as Celtic maintain their unassailable lead at the top of the Scottish Premiership table. This is Tino with the final whistle show. As I say, a very comfy one overall on the day. It was one of those ones where Hibs come into the game with their own motivations. They're obviously going for third place, and as it stood pre-match, they were 3 points clear. Following the weekend results, they remain 3 clear in that race for third. But we had that from their point of view, and Celtic with the whole nothing to play for materially, nothing to play for league-wise. But obviously we know we've got the cup final in just a couple of weeks' time, and that keeps everyone absolutely on their toes. And in terms of the pre-match news, the big surprise as such was that Kasper Schmeichel got the nod. We knew that he was fit and available. Brendan Rodgers had revealed that in the press conference on Friday. And despite Voljami Sinisalo doing a really good job, I think he's been great actually and stood up really well at the challenge at Ibrox last week. But he drops out and Kasper Schmeichel came right back in for this one. Schmeichel hadn't played since the 3-2 loss to Rangers on the 16th of March. He then went on to injure himself on international duty. But he's back and it's a massive boost to have him back ahead of the cup final. Austin Trusty also comes back in. He has quite quickly become Celtic's forgotten man at the back, and I don't know if the writing's on the wall for what his future may be. £6 million is a lot of money for Celtic to spend on anyone in general, but certainly for a centre-half. And it feels like at this moment in time, Brendan Rodgers still isn't fully convinced that Trusty is the man. But he gets the nod yesterday. Cameron Carter-Vickers drops out, and we know young Dane Murray, he won't play again this season. He's injured. And it's going to be Trusty or Nawrocki. The writing is absolutely on the wall for Nawrocki. So Austin Trusty gets the nod alongside Liam Scales. Trusty himself hadn't played since that loss to St Johnstone back at the start of April. The other change is Nicolas Kühn, who comes back in after missing the Rangers game last week. He could have made a big difference on the day, but didn't play. It wasn't fit or available for that. And we'd seen the pictures this week. He's come back to the party sporting a nice black eye, and Rodgers revealed he also had stitches above the eye after a training ground clash. So I need to see, again, what kind of response we get from Nicolas Kühn. Good against Hibs, played his part without being exceptional, and we'll get to all of that and then some. Nice moment ahead of the game. Celtic's players walked out with some young people from the Celtic FC Foundation's Ability Counts programme, and as a collective, they were highlighting the importance of inclusion and accessibility for all in support of Accessibles Week of Action. So great to see. There's a really brilliant group photo of this, actually. If you jump onto Celtic's Twitter, it's all the players and young people on the pitch after the game, and just a nice moment for all concerned. So well done to the club, well done to all who took place, and I'm sure there's memories for a lifetime created by that one. Just finally, pre-match, Hibs gave us a guard of honour, which was nice, a nice touch, something that wasn't afforded to us at Ibrox last week, and that's fine. You wouldn't really want it anyway. Got to sing Some for the Best and have a laugh there, so that's all good. And Hibs were playing their part at that time, but then after the coin toss, they switches over. So Celtic generally always shoot towards the Lisbon line stand, the traditional Rangers end. But for some reason, David Gray and his Hibs side decided to turn us around, so we're shooting down towards the Jock Steenie stand. And I've got mixed feelings on that. I think as a team, David Gray or anyone has the right to try and gain any small advantage they can. And if disrupting us helps them do so, then go for it. There's no great issue with that. The other side of it, of course, is that you can just piss Celtic off. You can annoy the players and annoy the captain. And that can obviously then go against you. And you could debate how well it worked or not, because it is Hibs that take the lead. But obviously Celtic deal with that and then some and come out good in the end. The way the game played out, I thought Celtic started well. I thought we were well in control, knocking it around under no real pressure. Hibs were struggling to find Martin Boyle and anyone else up top. And I think Celtic were doing pretty well controlling the game and managed to create a couple of really decent chances, particularly for Idah. And a couple of groans went up, when he wasn't able to take his early chances. But obviously he made up for that a wee bit later on. And we'll get to that just shortly. I'll also read out a quote from Idah in terms of where he's at on things and what's going on, for him at Celtic at this moment in time. But as I say, as Hibs that take the lead, it's Martin Boyle in the 25th minute. And from our point of view, it's a pretty scrappy goal. It's not one I get, hugely upset about in the bigger picture, but it's always frustrating to concede goals unnecessarily. And you know that Kasper Schmeichel his number one aim coming back in, out with getting the win, of course, would be to keep a clean sheet. That'd be the big target. And 25 minutes in, you can't do that. I think Greg Taylor is light in blocking the cross. I think he's got to get closer. I think it's Cadden that whips in. And it's then bumping about. Tony Ralston could maybe have engaged quicker as well, when the cross comes out the other side. But it finds itself back in, and Austin Trusty is cheap with the clearance, and Boyle snaps on it, and it's a decent low finish, and it's 1-0 Hibs. And they enjoyed the moment, and at that point, in terms of how they celebrated, you could see how much they were up for the game. And I think actually what it ended up doing was spurring Celtic on, but we can't afford to be giving teams too many opportunities like that and giving teams something to protect. Hibs were unable to do so. They, after the goal, went 5 at the back, but they struggled to contain guys like Kuhn, Idah and Maeda. But you don't want to give an Aberdeen, an opportunity to do something like that in the Cup, and we'll play Aberdeen midweek. We'll get to that soon enough. But you don't want to give them the opportunity to take a lead in a Cup final and potentially dig deep, park the bus and all those kind of things. So, yes, a scrappy goal, but in the bigger picture, no big issue. And the hope is that we can sharpen up on that and learn in good time for what lies ahead at Hampden. We don't need to wait too long, though, for the equaliser, and it's Nicolas Kühn. And again, there's been a lot of chat, a lot of commentary about Nicolas Kühn. Is he up for it? Where is he at on things? Has his head been turned? I'm a massive Nicolas Kühn fan. I'm actually quite surprised at the stick he's got. I think he's had such a good season for us. I'll rhyme off his stats right now. After yesterday, he's now got 21 goals for the season and 15 assists. So that's over 48 games. Let me do my maths. That is 36 goal contributions in 48 games, which is pretty impressive stuff for anybody. We do know, of course, that's fairly front-ended. It came at the early part of the campaign. He did have that dip after the turn of the year. But it's some massive moments for Celtic, including goals against Bayern Munich, Leipzig. I remember a winner at Ross County when he was on great form earlier in the season. And I think he can be really pleased with his efforts. But like all wingers, he'll take dips at different times. And there's no doubt that has happened. The important thing is how Nicolas Kühn responds. And the important thing from a club point of view is to see where he's at. Does he want to move on now? Has he had his fix of Scottish football and of Celtic? And if so, so be it. And the club can work hard to make sure that we get the right figure for him, because Celtic hold all the cards. I'm sure when Kühn signed, he came in on a 5.5-year deal. Pretty sure that's the case, which is a big deal for anybody. But it's smart. And you see things like Trent Alexander leaving Liverpool for nothing at this moment in time. Celtic rarely lose players without a fee. We do this very well. So at the moment, if someone wants to take on Nicolas Kühn and he wants to move, fine, you need to pay the money. And Celtic do hold all the cards with regard to that. I don't want to see him move on. I'd really love to see at least another year of Nicolas Kühn at Celtic. I think he's a huge talent. And I think some people are quick to forget just how exceptional he was at times early on this season. I thought he was really, really on brilliant form, showing some great stuff. And at that stage, people are talking about 25 and 30 million. That doesn't change overnight. Your form can dip, but you're still the player with the ability to do what he done. So I'm excited at the prospect of Nicolas Kühn staying on, but we need to see if that remains to be the case. But in terms of the goal against Hibs, so Tony Ralston, who I thought had a really decent game as well at right back, Tony Ralston clips the ball into a good area in the channel. Nicolas Kühn has made a run at the same time as Idah, and he does done just enough. I think it's Bashiri that he's occupied, and the ball makes its way into the path of Kühn. The goalie's committed by this point, but Kühn takes a clever and controlled first touch past him, and then it's a roll into the empty net, and we're good to go, and it's 1-1 Celtic. And not long after, it's Idah. And as I say, Idah, he did lack a cutting edge, a clinical edge with some of his earlier chances in the game, but he's spot on for this one. Again, it's it's good work down that right-hand channel. This time it's Kuhn turn provider. He clips it into a great area for Idah, knows where the goals are, doesn't need to look up, turns round and reverses it across the goalkeeper to smash it home for 2-1 Celtic, get into half-time. And as I say, there's lots of talk about Kühn just now, lots of talk about Idah. And again, I'm a fan of both. We had our chat on the show on Monday, last week's show, myself, James and Paddy. James and Paddy aren't as convinced on Idah. I think they both feel that if we could get most, if not all of our money back from him right now, then it would be the move to make. But I'm not so sure. I think he's a real talent, and I think he offers a lot to this Celtic lineup. And I also think he's going to improve. I know he's not young in terms of football. I think he's 24. But I think there's still good development for Idah, and I think he's in a good place to do so. under Brendan Rodgers. In terms of the player himself, as I say, I'll read out this quote, which brings up a couple of interesting points which we can then go on to discuss. He says, "I'm on 19 goals now, which is really good. I've said it before, for the minutes I've played, to get 19 goals is unbelievable. I'm confident in myself. There are lots of things that I think I do for the team that help a lot. I'm really pleased. Some unselfish runs that I make will create space for others. I think a lot of that will go unnoticed. I get it. Fans aren't going to be looking at that. They want to see goals. But I'm here to help the team at the end of the day. It's a big bonus when I do so. It can be frustrating at times, but at the end of the day, it's helping the team." And that kind of backs up a lot of what I've been saying. For Celtic, we've obviously lost a real talent and a real goal-scoring talent in Kyogo. And Kyogo's game was all about goals. Sometimes he could drop in areas and, find midfielders before spinning off the shoulder and things like that. But generally his world was getting on the end of chances, and he'd done that so effectively in his 3-ish seasons at Celtic. Adam Idah's a different player. He's not the out-and-out goal scorer that Kyogo is, nor do I think he'll ever be. But I do think he's got a slightly more rounded game, and I think he fits well within the system that Brendan Rodgers wants to play. And I think ultimately, if he wasn't doing what the manager wanted him to do, he'd find himself out the team. We know we can play Maeda through the middle. We know that we could have played James Forrest or Yang or anyone else in the wing to make up your front three. So he's not there just for fun. Brendan Rodgers doesn't give out charity minutes. He's there because the manager feels he deserves to be there and that he plays a role for the team. And that is the thing. So there's goals throughout this Celtic team. What was my stat recently? I think there's 7 players for Celtic right now, this season squad, that are on double figures for the season, which is pretty impressive across the board. You look at the amount of goals that creates. We've got 106 league goals for the campaign and counting, and so on and so forth. There's plenty of goals in this Celtic side. So just because your centre forward isn't having a 30-goal season, then it's not the end of the world, because he is creating space and helping create opportunities for other players. His goal tally is good, well, certainly reasonable. He's got 19 goals for the season. He's only got 1 assist, which is interesting. I'm surprised to read that. I thought he'd have more of that, but 19 goals for anybody is decent. You always, of course, have to look at the amount of games that Celtic play. We're 54 games in. He's played 51 of them, and there's an argument that a Celtic striker should be scoring more, despite that. I think now the stat reads that Idah has started 23, there or thereabouts, which I was also surprised by. I thought with Kyogo around at the time and Maeda's form, he might have started less games, but he started 23. That's quite a lot of games to start for Celtic, but his argument would be 19 goals out of 23 starts isn't bad, and then his different contributions off the bench. So you can argue where you're at in that one, but I'm a massive fan. I really am. I think he's got a lot to offer. I like his attitude. I don't think he's lazy. I don't think he's work shy. Yes, I think his first touch could improve and things like that, but I think he's got good character and good attitude. And I'm really keen to see what happens with Adam Idah after a good pre-season under Brendan Rodgers, which he missed out on last time. And obviously he came halfway through last season, so he didn't, of course, get a pre-season at that point either. A full pre-season under Brendan Rodgers, I think we could see a more effective and a different Adam Idah moving forward. I always ask the question, and I was with a mate, Gary, at the game yesterday, and talking about various players, and the question is, can we move forward? Can we progress in Europe with said player in the team? I think we can with Adam Idah. Now, you can debate whether he's going to be the out-and-out number 9. That's a slightly different question, but we know now it's a squad game. The team that starts is rarely, if ever, the team that finishes these games. You tend to see managers like Brendan Rodgers make the big changes on the 60-minute mark, and sometimes that's the changes that go and win you the game or draw you the game or whatever it might be. And I think we can progress with Adam Idah, certainly as part of the squad. Celtic will sign a number 9, or absolutely should sign a number 9 in the summer, and that will create further competition for Adam Idah. But the cliche still remains. I think it is Brendan Rodgers' quote that often competition can be the best coach. And it is a cliche for a reason, because there's various examples. We've heard about, or we've spoken about James Forrest. The big push for him was Paddy Roberts coming in. James Forrest was kind of coasting to an extent because he knew he would play right wing every week for Celtic without much competition. Roberts came in, and all of a sudden you've seen an uplift in James Forrest's game. And that competition, analogy competition, can be the best coach. That can be something that applies individually to a James Forrest or to an Adam Idah if another striker comes in. And it can also be something that applies on a team basis. So if Celtic continue to show up at the top table of the Champions League and play against the likes of Aston Villa's and Bayern Munich's and Leipzig's and whoever else we've come up against this season, Borussia Dortmund's, let's not talk about that. But these teams playing at this level pushes Celtic as a collective, and it allows us to fine-tune what we're doing and improve year on year. And as I say, from an individual point of view, guys like Idah Maeda can also improve. And I do think he'll continue to improve in a Celtic shirt. And I don't think Celtic should entertain any offers that come in. And I don't think it seems the player is looking for that kind of move either. The big call will be if Brendan Rodgers feels that he's got to be part of his team moving forward. And I think he does. So let's see. But to ask the same question, can we progress in Europe next season with Idah Maeda? Where does that sit with the likes of Austin Trusty that I mentioned earlier on, Liam Scales, Greg Taylor? These guys were all fine yesterday. They weren't hugely tested against Hibs. You can certainly debate Trusty should have done better for the goal. But are these guys who can take us forward when it really matters, in terms of the cutthroat level of the Champions League and what we're looking to achieve? I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure. And obviously this is a post-match in terms of where we're at with Hibs, but I just don't think these are the guys that take us to the next level. You've obviously got the fact they're very comfy domestically. They've, the lull after this season and whatever else has gone before. They've got a fair amount of medals, between them. I think Greg Taylor's now got 11 for Celtic. Scales will have a few. Trusty, potentially on his way to a treble of trophies or medals. So there's no debating things domestically. These guys are capable at that level. Can they go to the next stage? I'm not convinced, but another chat for another day. Get into the second half, as I say, 2-1 up after losing the early goal, or early-ish, and Celtic very much in control of the game at this point. Checking the stats, overall, it was 76% possession to Celtic and 24% to Hibs. And it tells its own story, and Celtic really put the game to bed on the 56th minute. It was Reo Hatate, who himself is having great form, and again, very much in the Idah Maeda, Nicolas Kühn mould. Splits opinion to a huge extent. Doesn't split opinion here. I think he's a brilliant player, and I'd love Celtic to keep a hold of him again, at least for another year, because I think Reo Hatate is just about to go into his peak. I think he's 26, 27, and he's at that fun age for a footballer where he might see this as a time to kick on and try another culture, another environment. But I'd love to see him stay on because I think he's a huge talent. And he showed that again with a brilliant goal yesterday. I think it's Maeda gets down the left, puts it across into the box. The keeper should deal with it. He spills it and it's bouncing around a bit. Makes his way to Callum McGregor on the edge, who plays it to Arnie Engels, who's smart enough to just put it into the path of Reo Hatate. And it's a great curling finish into the bottom corner. You could see the player really enjoyed it. It's 3-1 Celtic before the hour mark, and you're absolutely good to go. And as I say, at that point, I don't think Hibs had any answers. I really don't. There wasn't huge threat. Schmeichel made a couple of saves, first half especially, which is good to see. He actually had a very poor kick very early in the game, first couple of minutes. But that aside, Kasper Schmeichel was very comfortable, and he'll be glad to have just come through the game unscathed, albeit not getting that clean sheet. And it gives Celtic the chance to bring on a couple of subs throughout the remainder of the second half, including a young player, which we'll get to just shortly. But before that, you've got James Forrest and Paulo Bernardo coming in for Nicolas Kühn and Callum McGregor on the 73rd minute. And both were fine. Nothing to get excited about one way or another. The big hope, of course, is that James Forrest gets his goal, the goal that would mean that he scored in 16 consecutive seasons for Celtic. But it wasn't to be, and I'm going to put Johnny Kenny in the same bracket as James Forrest here. So Johnny Kenny comes in, him and Luke McCown come on the 80th minute for Idah Maeda and Reo Hatate. And I think that James Forrest and Johnny Kenny are both trying too hard at this moment to get a goal. And it must be difficult. James Forrest is the kind of guy where I think he'd make his peace with it pretty quickly if he didn't get that goal. And that's fine. He's quite a balanced, mature player these days. But he definitely wants to get it. It's something he would rather do than not. And I wonder if he's now in a position where he's putting too much pressure on himself. You can hear the fans, and nobody can blame the fans for wanting him to get the goal, but we're all desperate to see it. But the moment he gets the ball anywhere within range, 30 yards in, the calls for him to shoot are coming up. And I just wonder if James Forrest playing his natural game, not forcing the issue, might give him the best chance of getting that goal. But we'll need to see. The time's running out on this season. 2 league games left. We've got Aberdeen at Pittodrie on Wednesday. We've got St Mirren Trophy Day on Saturday, and then the cup final. So the clock is absolutely ticking on James. But I think if he just relaxes into his own game, there's a good chance he'll get that goal. And Johnny Kenny, as I say, he's in a similar boat. He's not scored yet for Celtic. He'll be desperate to prove that he can cut it at this level and to at least earn a chance to take a full part in pre-season and potentially be a part of the first team squad going into next year. I don't know where I'm at in Johnny Kenny because I just don't have enough, or I've not seen enough evidence to show me one way or another. I've seen some of his goals for Shamrock Rovers. Was it Rovers? I think it was Rovers. He was back at this season on loan, and he was scoring Conference League goals, and I think he got 20-odd goals for the season, which was great. But I just don't know if maybe that's his level or maybe he has got levels to go. I really don't know. I've not seen enough, as I say. And he'll be keen to prove a point here over the next, as I say, 2-3 games. And if he's lucky enough to be in the cup final squad and getting a goal, it is certainly something that brings you to the manager's attention, albeit he'll be getting watched closely at Lennoxtown and beyond. But again, if he relaxes, he might do better. There was a chance, there was a ball that broke to him, and if he'd have just taken a sharper touch, Idah had all the time in the world to go and make the finish, and it wasn't to be. So, yeah, James Forrest, Johnny Kenny, just relax, lads, and hopefully the goals will come. The final sub of the day, as I mentioned, it's a massive moment, isn't it? It's young Sean McArdle, 17 years of age, making his Celtic debut, coming on for Arne Engels in the 85th minute. And I thought he looked quite good, some quite lively touches, some quite confident touches. There was also a moment where he was slack, gave the ball away cheaply, and ended up the defence had to kind of mop up for him and get things back on track. But they're all part of his learning curve here at Celtic. And, he's come on in the 85th minute. The game's ran to 94, I think it was. So 9-10 minutes, give or take. And he'll have learned a lot in that short time. But the hope is that it's not just a flash in the pan. We've seen Jude Bonner this season. I've gone over this stat recently. We've seen Jude Bonner this season for 10 minutes. We've seen Francis Turley for 1 minute. We've seen Daniel Cummins for 9 minutes against Aston Villa. And we've seen a wee bit more of Dane Murray. He got a game against Wraith Rovers in the Cup and also a cameo against Villa. But that's it in terms of these academy players. And I think we all love to see academy players get a chance, but not if it's just he comes in now and we don't see Sean McArdle again until this time next year or similar. You would hope that they come in and just get, if they're good enough, of course, they get drip-fed over the next few games and we see a wee bit more of them. There is an interesting quote from Brendan Rodgers on Sean McArdle, so I'll read that out. He said, "There's always a pathway here for young players. Sean's done well with the B team. He's 17 years of age, and to come out and get that feeling for the last 10 or so minutes was great for him. He needs to build on that now. He's got that feeling. He's not a first team player yet, but he's had an opportunity and he's shown personality. He's got to be curious and speak to Callum McGregor and speak to all these guys who have come through the system." He said the opportunity, but now the really hard work begins, and he'll need to try and sustain that. And that's the challenge. That is absolutely it. And 17's pretty young, you'd have to say. And some of the boys at Celtic that have moved on, whether it's Reo Hatate, Daniel Kelly or others, they become 19 or 20 even before they're making their Celtic debuts. And then you look across the way, and Lennon Miller at 18 has got nearly 100 appearances, 100 senior appearances. So there's all this going on, and players can ultimately only improve and prove themselves when they're playing for the first team. So the hope is that Sean or anyone else that finds himself in Sean McArdle's position can really kick on and gain the manager's trust and get more minutes. I think we'd all like to see it. But congratulations to Sean in the meantime. It's a massive moment for any kid making his Celtic debut, and at 17, it seems that he's absolutely living the dream. So well done to him. And it's interesting to hear the manager's comments about the fact that he should speak to Callum McGregor and maybe the likes of James Forrest and Tony Ralston and others who have come through the system. And I'd like to think that he's maybe already done that, or that they've reached out to him, because they've been where he wants to be, and I'm sure their advice would stand him in really good stead. But as I say, in the meantime, well done to Sean, and hopefully he can now kick on. In terms of the final whistle, so the game plays out at that, as I say, 94 minutes in, no additional scoring, and no huge surprise that Celtic managed to eventually, I would say, coast to victory. I generally feel that we were in second gear, more or less, maybe third gear throughout the game, and had Hibs come back at us, had they made it to each or whatever, I feel Celtic could have gone to a different level. I think we were very in control, and Hibs probably won't have anticipated picking up something that I'd love to, of course, but their challenges lie elsewhere. I think they play Rangers at Easter Road, I'm sure, on the last game of the season, so Saturday coming, and they would fancy themselves to take all 3 points there, as they've done previously against Rangers, and they then need to see how things shake up with Aberdeen elsewhere. In terms of Celtic's overall record now in the 36 league games so far, we've won 28, we've drawn 4 and we've lost 4. And I think, as I mentioned, we've now scored 106 league goals, which equals the tally achieved by Brendan Rodgers' Invincibles of 2016-17. And in terms of personal records, I've touched on James Forrest and I've touched on Johnny Kenny. Obviously, those lads are waiting for that elusive goal, respectively. And Kuhn and Maeda, there was chat that, will he make 40 goals this season? If he does, it's going to be a spectacular end to the campaign. He's got 33 just now, so it means he's got 3 games to score those 7 goals if he's to reach 40. Not impossible for a guy like Kuhn and Maeda. I would maintain that nothing's impossible for a guy like Kuhn and Maeda, but time is running a wee bit tight for 40 goals. But an incredible season overall. Swept the boards at the Club Player of the Year last Sunday, and also picked up the PFA Player of the Year. And I think this weekend, potentially tonight, Sunday night, would be the Scottish Football Writers Player of the Year. So fingers crossed for Dyson that it's a full sweep of the trophies there. Just an incredible season. In terms of what's up next for Celtic, I've mentioned it, but at Pittodrie on Wednesday, and that's an interesting one. So myself, James and Joe from the show, we were all there, Brido as well actually. I think it was December when we won 1-0 thanks to a really well taken Reo Hatate goal after a brilliant assist from Greg Taylor. A horrible night at Pittodrie in terms of weather stuff, but Celtic done what they had to do to get the win. And I think Celtic would be looking pretty comfy getting up here on Wednesday. We'll do a match preview as we always do, so we'll catch that on Tuesday. But it's a game where, again, I just think the quality will shine through. Aberdeen are hugely motivated, hugely incentivised to go and get 1, if not all 3 points on the day. What Celtic will be keen to do, and what Brendan Rodgers has absolutely done since Aberdeen drew with us to each at Celtic Park in October, is put down the marker as to who the best team in the country really are. And I don't think he will want to give them any encouragement getting into the cup final. So we play on Wednesday, cup final's a week and a half after that. I don't think Brendan Rodgers wants to give any belief, any encouragement to this Aberdeen side. And I think Celtic will take care of business on Wednesday. But we'll get to that, as I say, that's all further down the track. And then it's Trophy Day on Saturday, 12:30 kick-off against St Mirren at Celtic Park. Again, we'll have the preview out for that one on Friday. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us here for this one, the final whistle show after yesterday's 3-1 win over Hibs. So a busy week ahead, as mentioned. We'll be back on Monday night tomorrow with the Celtic Exchange Weekly. Remember, that comes out on a Monday for members of the Celtic Exchange Plus. There's a link how to get involved with that on the show notes. Otherwise, it's out for everyone else on Tuesday, as is the preview for the Hibs game on Tuesday, and then the aforementioned preview for St Mirren on Friday. Lots going on, but all good stuff as Celtic look to have a brilliant end to the season. In the meantime, thanks as always for your ongoing support of the Celtic Exchange. It's massively appreciated by myself and the team. Have a brilliant end to your weekend, enjoy your Sunday, and we'll see you again for another busy week of all things Celtic.